Welcome back to Power Dilemma here at TAG TV. Patrick Brown is attempting a political comeback less than 6 months after he was forced to step down as leader of Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party. Mr. Brown officially entered the race to become chair of the region of Peel, writes the Globe and Mail. Mr. Brown, who many observers had expected would become Ontario's next premier, instead resigned as PC leader in January amid allegations of sexual misconduct broadcasted by CTV. Mr. Brown has denied the allegations and launched a lawsuit against the network. CTV News says it stands by its reporting. Mr. Brown opted not to run in the recent provincial election after he was barred from running as a PC candidate in March, and instead, Mr. Brown recently announced to run as regional chair for Peel. The post was previously appointed by the region's councillors. For the first time this year, however, residents will be voting directly for the chair in the municipal election, which is scheduled for October 22nd. The former PC leader is writing a book about his ouster titled Take Down: The Political Assassination of Patrick Brown. Mr. Brown said he is now hoping to publish this book in November. So to talk about Mr. Brown's comeback in politics, his books, and his community engagement, we have the man himself in our Power Dilemma at TAG TV. Welcome to my show, Patrick.
Well, Sarah, great to be back on your show. If I recall, I was on the show just a few years ago.
You were. Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. So, Patrick, the Globe and Mail heading came up. Former Ontario PC leader Patrick Brown enters race for Peel Region Chair. So why Patrick Brown wants to run? Why in politics? Because public service could be done in other sectors as well.
So, like you, Sarah, I love public service. I love helping people. I love helping families. And you're right, there's different ways to opt for public service. You know, my grandmother was a volunteer at the hospital for over 50 years, and that was her public service. My fiance works at Sick Kids Foundation. She loves nothing more than working for sick kids. The way I've loved to help people is through the political process, where you can better families' lives by making life a little bit easier. And frankly, there are challenges facing Peel that I want to hit dead on. You look at the rising rates of crime, that needs to be addressed. The gridlock, the suffocating gridlock that plagues Peel needs to be addressed. And frankly, we need to do a better job at recruiting jobs and investment to Peel. Too many people living in Mississauga and Brampton have to leave to get work. I'd also say, you know, when I was opposition leader, Sarah, I toured every hospital in the province, and the underfunding and the overcrowding in Peel is amongst the worst in the province. And I've heard story after story of families, when they need to go to a hospital, rather than being stuck in a hallway in Peel, they go to another city. They'll drive to Oakville to the hospital, and that's not good enough. I want to be an advocate for Peel, that we deserve a fair deal. We need to make sure that we have roads that can move cars quickly, that we don't have the suffocating gridlock. We need to recruit jobs and investment in industry to Peel, and we need to make sure that we have a strong, united voice to senior levels of government, that our healthcare apparatus needs to be properly funded.
Okay, so you said in a recent Globe News 640 Toronto talk show recently, and I quote, "I started out in municipal politics, which is non-partisan setting. So it's going to be good to be back to that." So my question is, why municipal politics? And our viewers would like to make sense of this non-partisan.
So in provincial and federal politics, you have political parties that comprise the legislature. In the municipal level, you don't have political parties. There's not the blue team or the red team or the orange team or the green team. It's about ideas and people. And frankly, you know, I'm looking forward to that. You know, my favorite premier was Bill Davis. I thought he was one of Ontario's finest public servants. And I always really admired him because he was collegial, collaborative. He wasn't overly partisan. And one of my frustrations with provincial and federal politics is that it is so partisan. Everything the Conservatives do, the Liberals dislike. Everything the Liberals do, the Conservatives dislike. And I've always said in politics, and it shouldn't matter the color of the idea that was put forward. It shouldn't matter if it's a blue bill or a red bill. If it makes sense for Ontario, if it makes sense for Canada, we should support it. I've always said, and Sarah, you've heard me say this many times, there's no monopoly on a good idea. What counts is, does it help people? And that's difficult to break through in the world of partisan politics, because it's so much of my team, your team. What I love about municipal politics is that there's only one team, and that's helping people.
Okay, so it's kind of safe being nonpartisan and going municipal?
Well, municipal is nonpartisan, so there's not political parties at the municipal level, and frankly, that's refreshing.
Okay, so in one of the other interviews you said, and I quote, "I still love public service, I love helping people, I love bettering our community. They say adversity makes you stronger, and I'm up for the task of dealing with the challenges that face Peel region." What do you mean by adversity?
So adversity means when you face personal
In this very context.
difficulty, yeah. And so obviously what I had to go through earlier this year was tough on myself, tough on my family, but you can't look backwards. You just have to use that as strength. And you know, that adversity, I think, is you know, it knocked me down, but I got back up, and that's what counts. And frankly, that's what the people of Peel, I think, want in a chair: tenacity, determination. We got big challenges that we have to address head on, and we're going to need determination to reduce the level of crime. We're going to need determination to deal with the gridlock. We're going to need determination to recruit good paying jobs to Peel. We're going to need determination to deal with the social housing crisis, where the wait times are 6 to 8 years. And I hope to take that determination and that work ethic and that tenacity to take on these challenges.
So I'm going to ask you, you know, up close. It's an up close personal interview with you. The coming question is, you know, personal. And Patrick, do you think that the entire work for winning the 2018 election by the Progressive Conservative Party was done by you, and the credit was given to someone else?
Listen, I think there's many people that were responsible for the success of the party on June 7th. You know, I felt like I ran 41 kilometers of a marathon and someone else finished the last kilometer, but I didn't do it alone. You know, we hosted fundraiser after fundraiser to get rid of the party debt. We recruited great candidate after great candidate, and we built a great team. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who gets credit. The issue is, do we help people in Ontario? I made some pretty big commitments when I was PC leader. You look at the promise I made to fund mental health, $1.9 billion a year towards mental health. That's the dirty little secret in Ontario's healthcare system. And I hope that it's honored. I hope that the government, which has said they'll make that investment, that they do. If we make life easier for families, if we deal with the overcrowding in the Peel hospitals, if we deal with gridlock, then that will be the vindication that I'm looking for, that we've actually changed Ontario for the better.
So one more very personal question. Patrick, do you feel that you're a fractured, injured politician, and now you're reviving back and you've survived it?
Listen, there's obviously people that tried to hurt me, have a few knife wounds in my back, but you know, I don't bear grudges. I don't hold any resentment. I look forward, and I'm just excited about being able to continue to contribute. I never get involved in sort of the inside games and maneuverings. I'm just focused on making life easier for the people of Peel.
Okay, so moving forward to your run-in for the municipality of Peel. The chair of Peel is the CEO of the municipality and acts as the head of the regional council for the cities of Mississauga and Brampton and the town of Caledon. What more you're bringing to this position?
Well, I think I bring experience. I've been elected at all 3 levels of government. I understand that there is only one taxpayer, and there's no point of pointing fingers. We just need to get the job done for the people of Peel. I also bring, frankly, an array of contacts and relationships. And when I go out there and pitch investment in Peel, I think some of those contacts and relationships I've built are going to come in handy.
Okay, so there are 6 other candidates who are currently signed up for the position, including Mississauga Councillor Ron Starr. How would you deal with this competition right after you were made to leave the leadership of Ontario's biggest party?
Well, I would say more the merrier. That's the beautiful thing about democracy. And if there's 6 candidates running, or 7 or 14, it's good when people participate. And so I hope the other candidates enjoy the experience, that meet as many people as possible, and knock on a lot of doors. That's the best way to, talk to electors.
Tell us a little bit about your book, what it is comprised of, and who should read your book.
So anyone who's interested
in
purchasing my book, you can purchase it on Amazon. We haven't settled on the final title, but you look Patrick Brown, you'll see the book is up there. Frankly, I tell my story. I took a lot of controversial positions when I was the PC leader. I was the only conservative in the country at the time to speak passionately about climate change and wanting to do our part. I was the only conservative leader to support the motion condemning Islamophobia. Some of the opposition I got, Sarah, you remember at the time, there were a lot of people that was criticizing me, but I said it was the right thing to do. I don't care if you're of Hindu background, of Muslim background, of Catholic background, of Jewish background. Hate against anyone is just wrong. And I gave that speech in the legislature, and I talk about that. I talk about how I was building a modern, inclusive conservative party. I always said, it doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what God you worship. Everyone has a home in the modern, inclusive PC party. Everyone has a home in Ontario and in Canada. And we changed the party during that time. It wasn't your typical country club, all-white, old PC party. It became one that was diverse and reflected the mosaic of the province. And so I am proud of that inclusive approach that we took.
So we have a few more questions with Patrick Brown. After a short break, we are going to have Professor Nelson Wiseman from University of Toronto, and then we are going to have a little debate. Maybe Professor has a few questions to Mr. Patrick Brown. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Dilemmas at TAG TV. We have Patrick Brown in our studios, and we are continuing with the interview. And in this segment, we also have Professor Nelson Wiseman from University of Toronto. Welcome to my show, Professor.
Thank you.
And Professor, we also have Patrick Brown in the studios.
Very good.
Okay, so my question to you, Patrick, is Premier Doug Ford just announced a good cabinet, but it has been criticized for not being diverse. Patrick, first I'll take your comments, and then I will take Professor's comments.
Well,
Do you think it's diverse?
First of all, I don't want to be a backseat driver, and Premier Ford is entitled to pick the cabinet that he believes in. I would say this, though. I went to great lengths to recruit a slate of candidates that were diverse, that represented the mosaic of Ontario, and I think there are some very capable individuals who aren't in cabinet. I look at Prabh Sarkaria from Brampton, a successful, brilliant lawyer who of Sikh faith that could very well serve a senior cabinet role. I look at Nina Tangri with an impressive background who, I think it was surprising that she didn't make the cabinet. You look at Khalid Rashid, who was a senior executive at BlackBerry. He could, of Muslim faith and background from Pakistan, he could easily have been a cabinet minister. And so I think there are some missed opportunities of people that could serve in cabinet. Amarjot Sandhu, I remember from Brampton West, encouraging him to run. He was an international student. What a role model that he's now an MPP, a real hard worker, a real go-getter. And so I think there are certainly people who are qualified of different faiths and colors and diversity that could be in cabinet. And I hope that in the coming months and years that they will be given that opportunity. And I think the Premier would not be let down. I think these are some pretty great representatives, and I hope they're given a chance.
Okay, what do you think, Professor, on the cabinet made by Premier Doug Ford?
Well, I'm not completely surprised. I mean, I think the cabinet reflects a number of things. First off, we've got to remember that it's much smaller than the last cabinet, although I'm confident it'll expand. That usually happens. It's been shrunk from 29 to 21. There has been a lot of commentary about about racial diversity in the cabinet. It did pop up, but I'm not really surprised. A lot of the people have been serving in opposition as shadow ministers, and I think there would have been problems for the premier had he not put in those people into the cabinet. So you're always going to have this struggle between how many people you can put in and who it is you put in. But I'm curious, if I might ask Patrick, why he didn't run, because he was greenlit to be a candidate. You were greenlit to be a candidate by the party, and then you decided not to run, and that was always curious to me.
Okay, there's a question for you, Patrick, from Professor Nelson Weisman. Why didn't you run?
Well, I have some differences of perspectives with Premier Ford on some issues. I'm more of a Bill Davis conservative. I believe in that modern, inclusive, pragmatic conservatism. Having said that, I think Mr. Ford has a great team, an impressive slate of candidates, and I hope that they exceed expectations. I hope that they serve Ontario with distinction. We got to get this province back on track. We can't settle for a have-not province, and I'm not going to be part of that team at Queen's Park, but I am going to throw all my energy and heart into running for the chair of Peel Region, to looking at helping the people in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, and I'm looking forward to that challenge.
Well, hey, can I just ask another question?
Yes, please
then?
go ahead, Professor.
Are you trying to take Sarah's job?
No.
I said, are you trying to take Sarah's job as the as the top interviewer?
I invited Professor Nelson Weisman to ask a few questions to Mr. Patrick Brown. I invited him.
I'm only teasing you, sir. I know he's not. He's a great political science professor. Yeah. He was actually my political science professor at the University of Toronto. So I know he's not trying to take your job.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, I'm curious, because I saw your comment in today's paper that you're looking forward to participating in a nonpartisan forum again, and you mentioned you're running for the chair out in Peel. So are you no longer active in the Conservative Party? Have you had any contact with the Premier? I assume you're still a member of the party.
So I have many good friends who are members of the Premier's cabinet. Frankly, I went to great lengths to recruit Carolyn Maroney to run, Rod Phillips, Peter Bethlenfalvy. Some of the stars of the new cabinet are people that I personally expended a lot of time and capital to convince them to take the leap of faith to enter provincial politics. And of course, I've stayed in touch with them. I consider them all friends. I haven't spoken to the Premier, but I've spoken to certainly a number of the members of his administration and his team. What I say about municipal politics being nonpartisan is that there's no parties, and frankly, in municipal politics, we have to work with every party. And so whether it's looking for funding for Peel from the Trudeau Liberals in Ottawa or the Ford Conservatives in Queen's Park, I think you need to check your partisan allegiances at the door. And frankly, I'm looking forward to that, in the sense that I was always, when I say I'm a Bill Davis conservative, what I mean by that is he was always collaborative, collegial. He wasn't overly partisan. One of my favorite quotes that I used to say in the legislature all the time is, there's no monopoly on a good idea. It shouldn't matter if a good idea comes from the Liberals, from the New Democrats, or the Conservatives. If it makes sense for Ontario, if it makes sense for Canada, we should support it. And one of my criticisms of partisan politics is that there's a tendency that it's the blue team or the red team or the orange team or the green team, and there's this adversarial approach even to good ideas. And one of the nice parts of municipal politics is you lose a great element of that adversarial approach, and there's more scrutiny on the merits of an individual idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a question about, again, going back to the diversity of the region where you're running. Peel region is very diverse, and I believe the most prominent, correct me if I'm wrong, the most prominent demographics are the Muslim communities. How is that true?
Well, I think the largest communities would probably be South Asian. The Indo-Canadian community, particularly of Sikh faith, has a large component of of Peel region. But you're right, there is also, not as large, but there is a large Muslim community in Peel region as well.
How well you are positioned to deal with their problems and the issues of that very community, and how are you going to engage with that community?
Well, I certainly feel very grateful for the support we've been getting from the Muslim community. A number of the imams have already told me that they remember I was the only conservative leader in the country that supported the motion condemning Islamophobia. They're not going to forget that I was a friend. And frankly, there's been high-profile people in the community who have already publicly endorsed me. I look at Waqas Gondal from the Urdu Times. There are a lot of friends in the community, Badar from the Brampton Board of Trade, who have said, we want to actively campaign for Patrick, and I'm humbled by their faith and their support.
And was that the reason you changed from Barrie to Mississauga and you started living in Mississauga, because this is the community you resonate with?
Well, regardless of the different faiths and the diversity of Peel, before I was a member of Parliament, I practiced law in Brampton. My father's been practicing law in Brampton for 40 years, and my fiancée, Genevieve, is born and raised in Lorne Park in South Mississauga. Her uncle is the new MPP there, Rudy Cazzetto. Her family's been there for 4 generations, and so we've been living in Mississauga now, and felt this was an area that we could certainly contribute.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to congratulate you on getting engaged to a very beautiful, beautiful lady.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay, so Professor, do you have any other question to ask Mr. Patrick Brown?
Well, Patrick raised the issue that we should take good ideas from wherever they come from. That's going to be his attitude if and when he gets elected on Peel Council. So I'm thinking about, Patrick worked a lot on a platform last year. I don't know, I think it was maybe over 80 pages. It was very impressive and flashy, got a lot of attention, and one of its centerpieces was to have a carbon tax. And what we've been hearing from the Premier is he's assaulting both the cap and trade program that Ontario's been in. He calls it a form of carbon tax, and he's opposed to having a carbon tax. So I'm wondering if he can, what he thinks of this. Is he critical of the new government on this point?
So I've always believed that Conservatives should not be fearful to talk about the environment. I think sometimes we've avoided debates on the environment. Let's not forget that it was Bill Davis that created the Ministry of the Environment. It was Brian Mulroney that negotiated the Acid Rain Treaty, and I think there is a tradition of Conservatives caring about the environment. And frankly, I think Canadians expect Conservatives to put forward credible programs when it comes to dealing with climate change and doing our part. I agree with Mr. Ford that cap and trade is a flawed mechanism to deal with climate change. It was in my platform to dismantle cap and trade and simply accept the federal carbon price. Justin Trudeau has said that there's going to be a carbon price on every province, and it's up to the provinces just to decide where that revenue goes. So you can set up your own system, or you can accept the federal system. I wasn't proposing we set up our own system. I was saying that we would return any funds collected by the federal carbon price and return it to the people in broad-based tax relief. And so obviously Mr. Ford has chosen to fight that federal carbon price in the courts. What I would predict is, I think if you talk to a political science professor, they'll probably tell you that under the Constitution that the federal government does have this right, that I don't think the legal case is going to be successful, that we have a division of powers that allows that, but time will tell if the courts agree with that interpretation.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, anything, we always give a chance to our politicians to deliver a message to the viewers. Do you have any message to our viewers, Patrick?
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask Nelson Wiseman if he agrees with that perspective that the court will uphold the federal government's right to impose a carbon price.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, under Section 91, subsection 3, which gives the federal government access to any mode or system of taxation. And similarly, that's how we got the GST, despite protestations by every single province. But
you see, I was paying attention in your class.
yeah, You talk about the money going back to, if I can just focus on the issue of the feds imposing a carbon tax. I think they will, and I think they'll be successful in the courts. And they proposed giving the money back to the provinces, and you suggested you could provide broad-based tax relief, which is one possibility that could be done. And I think BC acted that way when they introduced a tax initially, although now they're using the money for other things as well. But it seemed to me that if we are talking about former Conservative premiers, I thought one of the tax that Premier Mike Harris used that was very, very effective is in the middle of his term, I remember getting a check for $100. And I think one of the dangers to the Conservatives here in the province is that the federal government might very well harvest the money from the tax that it's imposing, and rather than turning it over to the provincial government, send checks to individuals in the province, which will bring a lot of credit to the federal government and not so much to the province.
Yeah, and ultimately, Doug Ford will have to make that choice to allow the funds to stay with the federal government or to give it back to the people and choose how to use it as he deems appropriate. The proposal I put forward in the People's Guarantee, which was my platform, was that the federal funds that would be accrued from the federal carbon price, if given to Ontario, and that's what Justin Trudeau said he would do, we would return it in the form of a 22.5% middle-class tax break. And so that was the policy I put forward. Having said that, I am out of provincial politics now. I know sometimes we get bogged down in these issues. My focus now is not debating how I would have done things differently, but focused on how I can make life easier for families in Peel.
So now that you have brought up carbon tax, are you going to push for it once you are a regional chair?
There's no carbon pricing municipally.
Okay.
That's not a regional issue.
Not a regional issue.
It's the federal carbon price was a mandate on the provinces, not on municipalities.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it's not in your ambit. Okay, so any message to our viewers?
Well, I'd close by saying it's been an honor to be on TAG TV and that I'm eager to work for the community. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for how we can better serve Peel, you can contact us at patrick@servingpeel.com.
Okay, folks, I would like to thank my very worthy guest, Mr. Patrick Brown, and in the studio, and our very worthy guest, Professor Nelson Weisman from University of Toronto on the line. Thank you very much for being on my show. And we talked about very good points from Mr. Patrick Brown, who is running for the regional chair in Peel. Keep watching Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bukhari. Till next week. Ciao.